I'm super excited to welcome Dan Dankin, who's the Manager of Communications and Media Relations at Brock. So Dan is going to talk to us today about media training. So talking to the media, what that can look like, and what kind of supports are at universities sometimes to help you out with this kind of stuff. I've done this training with Dan before, so I can vouch for it, that it's got some great information, some great tidbits to get you thinking about talking to different audiences. And so I'm really excited to include this in this section of the training. So with that, I will flip it over to you, Dan. If anyone does have any troubles along the way, you can always reach out to Tammy and she will help us along. And with that, it's all you, Dan.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. And as Kyle says, I'll kind of go through this training slide deck and we'll chat a bit throughout. If you have any questions while I'm speaking, please just let me know. Interrupt me. I'd be happy to answer any questions in the middle of this, or obviously at the end as well. I really, sorry, I'm already getting ahead of myself here. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you'll have a greater comfort level of how to tell your story to the media, B, being comfortable with doing interviews, and also just a little bit of a better understanding of the process of university communications. Now, I will say, I know that some of you are joining from universities across the country and not just from Brock. Every university has a similar marketing and communications setup that we do. Ultimately, you have communicators who are there to help you tell your stories. And it may look a little different or have a different title from university to university, but there are people who can help you and who want to help you get the word out about your research. So at Brock University, our marketing and communications department, we're a small team, but I like to say we're small but mighty. We do a lot of work. So we put out about 200 media releases a year. We process somewhere in the area of 350 to 400 media requests. Those can be in response to those press releases, or in many cases, those are just the media coming to us looking for experts in any particular fields. We do have a studio that I'll show you on the next screen, so we can do live interviews. And then we also work with faculty members and grad students on putting together op-eds, opinion pieces. And then in normal circumstances, obviously things are a little bit different right now as we're still coming out of COVID, but we would also be holding press conferences and press events and tours and things like that. So one of the things that we added at Brock, I believe that it was in early 2019 that we opened this up, was a studio. And by the way, if someone can just confirm, maybe Kyle, just give me the thumbs up that my screen is moving along. You're seeing the studio right now. Great, thank you. So this studio space is at the base of Shimon Tower, well hidden away in the basement. Nobody would ever really know it's there. But what we're able to do is live interviews. We can do, radio interviews, we can do TV interviews, we can do recorded interviews and then share them with the media. We can do a variety of different things. What you're not seeing is if we turn the camera 180 degrees, you would also see there's a full green screen, which my colleagues on the digital side of the marketing and communications team use a lot for social media work and things like that. It's a really cool space that we pulled together. So I want to talk about the media landscape a little bit. And, this is Niagara, but I can assure you that wherever you are tuning in from around the country, this is a very similar situation. It's unfortunate, but it's the changing nature of media. So I was a reporter prior to coming to Brock. I worked for at various points all three daily newspapers in Niagara. And back when my career started about 20 years ago, you had these dailies, you had all these weeklies. These bottom two numbers are the key ones. You had 50 reporters and about 20 editors working just in Niagara. We have a population of around 400,000. So in the entire region. So if you sort of look at the landscape in just about any region in the country, it's a pretty similar story. You had large groups of media 20 years ago, and now you have significantly smaller pools of journalists and more online publications. In a lot of cases, the dailies dailies have gone away entirely, weeklies have gone away entirely, or in some cases there's a lot of sharing of content and things like that. So where that leaves us, or what that means to us as storytellers and of researchers, is that the negative side of it is, fewer stories are being written. There's no doubt about that. We have fewer requests for interviews. Fewer journalists are showing up at our media events, and when we again, pre-pandemic, when we would have media, when we would have press conferences, we just wouldn't get the same turnout that we would have gotten, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, certainly. And then this last point, it can be a tricky one. Sometimes when we are trying to tell our stories to the media, you have less experienced reporters, and it takes a little more work to help them understand the work that we're doing. And when you have really complex research that's happening, this can be a tricky one, because you're never given a lot of time to, tell your story. And so you really need to work with the media and really try to provide them with a really good understanding of what it is that you're doing. And we'll certainly talk more about that. Now, excuse me, the good side of that, the glass half full, if you will, is that there is a need to still to fill this space in newspapers, and radio stations are still looking for content, and TV stations. So there's more of a willingness from the media to use the content that we're providing to them, and that's a really positive thing. When I was a reporter, you would never run verbatim a media release that was put out by a university or any other organization. Now we are seeing that more and more, that we are providing the media with what we call, print ready or broadcast ready packages. These are full stories. In most cases, they are written by former journalists, because so many of us who work in communications now. We're providing them with photos, we're providing them with video, everything that they need to either run the entire story exactly how they get it, or all the tools so that they can write their own story. And, because of the nature of the digital world now, excuse me, we do have this opportunity to tell stories in new ways and really exciting ways. So let's talk about the when, why, and how. And these are sort of as we start to really talk about the goal of communication and the timeline of communication. All of this really is about, I'm sure everyone here has heard of the term knowledge mobilization, right? I think this has become a key phrase in grant applications and everything. Knowledge mobilization or knowledge translation, ultimately it is about taking your research and getting it out into the community. And this is what everyone who's in my role, this is our job, and this is our goal, is to take research being done in university at various levels, at the student level, faculty level, doesn't matter. We want to try to get that out there into the community. So when can we start to tell these stories? I think a lot of people think that the only time that you can have a story written about your work is when you've been published. When that big day comes, that it's finally, your research is finally done and it's been accepted and it's done and you're ready to go public with it. The fact of the matter is that there are many different points in that timeline of research, or that research cycle, where we can talk about this work and we can use the media to try to help bring attention to what you're doing. So obviously, when your research gets funded, there are, in many cases, research funding happens in these big groupings, and so there'll be stories that come out about all these different projects that are being funded. As you're looking for research participants, this has become a really important tool and something that has really helped us at Brock to get more more attention to the research that's happening right now. And so we'll do media releases saying, researcher X is looking for looking for participants for a study about this. From that story, let's say that we're doing either as a media release or as an internal, we have our Brock News. The Brock News is our internal publication. Once that story is there and it's on our internal news source, it can be shared on social media. Researchers can share it, and we can really try to get more people participating and aware of your research. Providing updates throughout the research cycle, that's another good opportunity. Of course, after your research is published, that's the obvious one. And then this last point, at a time when your work is timely. So poorly written point, but the point is, we really like to look at the calendar and say, okay, when are people talking about certain types of research? So you'll see an example shortly here where we did some media around a particular climate change research project. That was timed around the COP26 climate change conference that just happened in Glasgow. And there were actually a number of stories that we put out around that climate change conference because we knew that the world would be talking about that. It can even be something as simple as, next Friday is Black Friday. So right now we're actually working on what we call expert advisories. And these are basically a quick story that we put out to the media that says, hey, Black Friday is coming up. Here are 4 or 5 faculty members or grad students who are researching, who are doing research related to, in this case, Black Friday. And essentially what we're doing is just trying to get them to be interested in this research that's happening and hopefully wanting to speak with the researchers for a newspaper story or a radio interview or something like that. So that's a very popular way for us to get the word out about what you're doing or what other researchers are doing here. So the why. You are a researcher for your own reasons. Everyone has a different reason for, coming to university and getting into research. And ultimately, what most people are trying to do, though, is get people to pay attention to the work that you're doing. So whether that's publishing or whether that's trying to do the research itself and trying to get participants, ultimately, your goal is to get the word out about this research. And so that's what we want to try to help you. Another reason why is this idea of establishing yourself as an expert. We're fortunate at Brock that we have, some go-to experts in a number of fields. I'll give you one example. We have a prof in the Goodman School of Business here at Brock University, who he is arguably Canada's and in some cases the world's most foremost expert in 2 very different things. One is essentially missile defense systems, especially in the Middle East. The other is cannabis. He is a cannabis marketing expert. He's a marketing prof by trade. However, those are 2 areas of research that he has taken on over his career. He has now become the go-to guy when it comes to especially the cannabis marketing one. Obviously, the story of legalization in Canada, there has been a real need for experts to talk about the cannabis marketing, the marketing of cannabis, and he's our guy. So he has become an expert. We have many other examples of that. You don't have to be a faculty member to be that expert. If you are extremely knowledgeable in your area and you are someone who's researching something that others are not researching, then you can be that person that the media wants to talk to. And then, of course, this idea of kind of putting yourself on the radar of the institution. This can be beneficial for, obviously early career faculty members, for grad students. There are few things that are as satisfying to me as a communicator than when we put out a story and it ends up in the media and then, the president or the vice president research or someone on that level sends a message and says, hey, can you send me the contact information for this person? I just want to send them a note of congratulations. I know what those notes mean to people, and that is certainly a great way to get noticed in a really positive way. So the how. These 3 questions, if anyone is going to take notes, these are the 3. I would ask you to write these 3 questions down, because ultimately this is going to be the crux of this whole presentation. Our job as communicators is to try to get people interested in your work. The way that we will get people interested in your work is if you can answer these questions. What is the research about? So what's the message? Who will be or should be interested in this research? Who's the audience? And then finally, how's this going to change the world? I know that's a bit of hyperbole, but ultimately the research that we're doing, you're trying to solve a problem, make something better, examine something in history or explain something. Really, you're trying to solve something. Being able to answer these 3 questions will put you on the right path for the next steps, which we'll talk about sort of actually developing the story. But the key here is that ability to distill your research down into a very, very short amount of time or into very few words. And this can be extremely challenging. So the way I often describe it is, you are working on a research project for, in many cases, multiple years. In some cases, people have done a master's research project on a particular topic, and then they move on and do a PhD, and then maybe they move on and become a faculty member, and they're still researching this topic. And for years and years, you are researching a particular area, a particular topic, and then what we're asking you to do is take all of those years of research, thousands of hours of work, and in many cases, certainly thousands of words and hundreds of pages of work. And what you need to be able to do is explain in 1 paragraph what this research means. And so we often will start with the abstract, and that in some cases is, a few paragraphs or a little bit more. But really, we want to take all that and we want to be able to say, my research is about X. If you can answer that question, if I could meet you in an elevator and I find out that, you're a grad student, and I say, oh, you're researching, what's your research project about? And it's the elevator pitch thing, right? It's what every business incubator will tell you. You get onto an elevator with an investor and you need to be able to tell them what your project is about, get them to invest in your company before they get off the elevator. It's the same idea in research communications. If you had 15 seconds, 30 seconds to try to explain all those years of work, how would you do that? I would really encourage you, as you're doing your projects, to think about that. This is what my research is all about. The who will be interested, it's not just who will be impacted by your research, it's who's the audience going to be when we go to tell the story. So if you think back to the to that research cycle, it's if you're trying to attract people for your research project, then the audience is going to be different, let's say, than when you actually publish the research. And so let's use the example of, let's say you're researching, we just talked about Black Friday. So, let's say you're researching marketing, how people are marketed to on Black Friday. And you're trying to get research participants who, let's say, are going to go out at 5 a.m. on Black Friday and go buy a new TV. You want to attract those participants. So now your audience is going to be those people. It's going to be the people you're trying to get involved in your research. However, let's say you get to the end of the research project and now you have published this work and now you want to get media interest in this story about the marketing of Black Friday. Now your audience has shifted a bit, because now really the people who are going to be interested in your work are, it's a much wider audience. It's just people in society, right? It might be other academics. It might just be, talk show hosts who would love to talk about this idea of Black Friday marketing. So the audience is going to change. What is my research about? That doesn't change as much. The how will this change the world, or what is the impact that my research will have? That's something that often kind of evolves through the research cycle. Okay, so let's talk about developing the story. These are, I think it's 7 points altogether. These will, of course, change a little bit from project to project, but ultimately you'll understand the idea of this process. Step one, of course, really goes back to those last 3 questions. Pulling together that information, those bullet points, and really understanding what those answers are to those 3 very key questions, that will really help you move this process along and be ready to kind of get your story out there. Speaking with your supervisor, getting them on board, most supervisors want to be involved in the communication of research that they're supervising, of course. Many different universities have different processes for how this happens. Different supervisors, different faculty members may want to be more or less involved in the communicating of research projects. What's really important is that you have the green light to move forward with talking about this, and that obviously they're aware and you understand how involved they're going to be in that process. Figuring out who needs to be quoted in the story. It may seem like we're a bit ahead of ourselves here, but actually this is an important one because when you go to start working with, say, a communication specialist like myself, or if you're doing this on your own, as you go to start writing the story, ultimately you need to be able to figure out, along with those 3 key points from earlier, who are the voices in the story. So my guess is, it's probably going to be you as a primary voice. Maybe it's going to be a supervisor. Maybe it's going to be a research participant if for some reason that makes sense with what you're doing. Maybe it will be a co-lead researcher or things like that. It might be a community partner, right? Because in a lot of cases, research happens with community members and community organizations. So think about who those voices are going to be. And then think about what else you can include with these stories. And as I mentioned earlier, this is getting more and more important. It's never about just the story anymore. It's about the package. And so whether you're putting this out on social media, whether you're doing a YouTube video about it, whether you're doing a full media release about it, ultimately there needs to be a way that you can illustrate this story as well. So think about that. Maybe it's a photo from in the lab when you were doing the work. Maybe it's more of a stock image. Maybe there's a video that you're doing that can be shared along with this. So the more of that stuff we can include, the better. And one thing that's often overlooked is the value of headshots. I know that you are researchers and not actors trying to land a commercial role. However, the media almost always would like to have a photo of the people that they're talking to. And so, having some sort of photo that you like of yourself that is not taken just with you holding your smartphone, a foot away from your face, that's really important. Have that headshot just so that it's ready to go as you're telling these stories. All right, so now you have all those things pulled together. You're ready to actually tell the story. You have all the information, and you're able to provide that to a communications professional in your institution. As I say, every university has communicators that are there to help get the word out about your research. In some cases, it will be a faculty communication specialist. And in other cases, there's, for us, we have the Office of Research Services, for example. They have a communications specialist. Then there's central communications, which is what I oversee. And we work very closely with all the communicators around the university. Regardless, as you're going through this process, you're going to end up meeting with one of these communications people. And they're generally going to be the one who is going to ask you some questions, and they'll be the one who writes the story. So you're going to provide them with all that information that you've pulled together. Ideally, if there's a link to the published paper, or if there's even a draft sometimes of the research paper and things like that. Whatever you can provide that person, the better. Now, you're going to work basically back and forth. It's a collaborative effort to write the story. So in some cases, you'll be interviewed, and then the comms person will go back and they'll actually write the story. You'll end up having sort of that editing opportunity. At the internal level, you'll have the editing opportunity. At the external level, when it actually goes out to the media and when the media writes a story, you won't have that opportunity 99% of the time. We'll talk more about that after. So you're going to work back and forth on this, let's say it's a media release or a story. And then, of course, in whatever form your communication takes, you're going to get to that point where you're finally ready to hit send, and you're going to hit send, and then you sort of hope for the best and see what happens. I've been doing this for a long time. I still get a little bit of butterflies as I hit send on a big press release, because that's important work. Whether you're in my role as the communicator who's been given the responsibility to tell these stories, or whether it's you as a researcher who has spent all this time doing this work and is ready to get it out there into the community, it's a nervous time, but a great opportunity and a great time when you finally hit send, and then you just sort of hopefully wait for some interest to come back. Again, this can be a media release. It could even be a social media post that you put out there about it, or a YouTube video. So I want to go through an example of this process, and especially where it was rather successful. This thankfully happens on a regular basis. We do land our research in the media on a very regular basis. This is a high profile result, which we were really happy about, but it'll kind of help you understand the process a little bit here at Brock. So in this case, we had this research team at Brock who had researched this idea of fostering ocean empathy through future scenarios. So really they used VR. They created a very negative view of the future when it comes to oceans, and one with pollution and dark skies and no fish, and then a very positive view of the ocean, which obviously bright sunny skies, lots of fish in the sea, and so they allowed people to view these videos in virtual reality and try to understand, does empathy change if you are actually potentially seeing what could be the future. So they had this research published, I think September the 4th, it was published in People in Nature, which into itself is quite a high profile accomplishment to have it published there. And as you can see, this is their abstract. So, in this case, it was 4 points and a fair amount of information. This was not, when you think about it, this is not super complicated research. You can look at that headline and you can understand basically what this is all about. So on October the 6th, we put out this media release. This went out to not just local media, but we sent this out to national media as well, because obviously this is something that we knew would be of interest to a very wide audience. And of course, when we look back at those three key questions, what are we researching? That's quite easy. You can see that this is answered even in the headline here. Research examines what it will take to foster empathy for the world's oceans. All of their research is captured in that one headline. Who's the audience? In this case, it's basically anybody who lives on this planet and can be impacted by climate change. And then how will it change the world? Of course, we're talking about how people's empathy for the oceans may change based on this virtual reality. So this was a pretty easy one to answer those three questions. So we talk about the full package, having everything. So in this case, we had photos, we had this fantastic video that the research team pulled together, and we sent that out to the media on October the 6th as a whole complete package. Now, our first big hit on this came just under 2 weeks later when CBC's The Current had Jessica Blythe, the lead researcher, on the air. So on The Current with Matt Galloway. I don't know if we have any CBC fans in the group here. I'm sure we do. This is a huge deal, to have your research. See someone clapping. I agree. We were very, very excited about this. I would say we end up with our researchers on the current, half a dozen times a year, let's say. We're a smaller school in the Niagara region. It takes work to get us on the radar of the big Toronto media. When it happens, we're really excited about it. So Jessica went on, did this interview with Matt Galloway. It was fantastic. Now, what's exciting when you have high profile media like that is that it often garners more attention. And this happens, when stories end up in the Toronto Star. CBC often is interested. When it ends up on a let's say it's CH in Hamilton, the Hamilton Spectator is interested. There's a lot of looking at competing media to see what you've missed and then trying to pick up the story. So where things got even more exciting was that after Jessica was on the current, CBC's The National also picked up on the story. They thought she did great on the current. They loved the idea of the research. So on November the 1st, they sent a film crew down to Brock and they filmed an interview with Jessica. This is one of our new labs. It's a virtual reality. It's virtual reality, augmented reality, and essentially physical reality. They have the ability to change like aromas and things like that. It's a lot of use in the wine, our wine research. So anyway, we filmed it there. As you can see in the lower right photo, that's actually one of her grad students who also was very much involved in this research. And they interviewed her and she did a demonstration using the headsets and whatnot. So then we wait. This is the normal process. The interview happens and then we waited. On November 11th, CBC ran this story on its website, and of course on their primary cbc.ca website, which is great. So that happened November 11th. But we knew that there was this video that was coming at some point, or we certainly hoped it was going to happen on the national, and we were watching. It finally happened on Sunday night. So as part of the national broadcast, this was included. It was about a 2-minute segment talking about Jessica's research, or the team's research, I should say. But of course, other people as well who are dealing with climate change. And this is again a major accomplishment for any research team, but for us at Brock, this is a big deal, and we were extremely proud of this. So this is just a bit of an example of where your research can go, and you don't have to be some tenured professor who has been working in a university for 30, 40 years to get big media attention. In many cases, it's actually the newer researchers or newer faculty members or grad students, PhD students, who are doing this really interesting research and are extremely hungry to get the word out about their work. And the media doesn't care what your title is. They want to know that you are that you have the expertise to be talking about this, but they don't care if after your name, you have professor written there. They just want to know that the work that you're doing is going to be of interest to your audience, to their audience rather. So let's talk about some media tips and we'll kind of talk about the process of we've managed to get the media interested in your work and you're about to be interviewed. And so now where do we go from there? So one of the things that we always like to try to avoid is having scripts. You don't want to be doing an interview, especially when it's radio or when it's TV, and it seems like you don't know the stuff off the top of your head because you're just reading, and in a TV interview, that's the last thing they want. They never want you to have papers sort of in front of you or anything, because ultimately an interview, whether it's radio, TV, or print, ultimately it's just a conversation. If I stopped any one of you in the hall and, we talk about that elevator pitch, if we ran into each other and I knew that you had, done some research and I just wanted to kind of ask you like, oh, tell me more about that research. And well, that's interesting. Who was part of the research project? And, what's next now? What comes next in the life cycle of this research? You and I could have a conversation without any concerns, without you having any notes or anything like that, because you know more about that topic than I do, certainly, and then anyone in the media does. And so it's just about you answering the questions as they come up. Now, when we're doing interviews right now, so many of them are video based. They're Zoom based, just like this meeting. You're doing these interviews from your home. It's really important that if you're doing a media interview, you want to think about your surroundings, right? So you want to think about the noise, you want to think about the lighting, you want to think about what's on the shelves behind you. Just whatever is sort of in view of that camera is what people are going to see. So if you want them to see that you have a bunch of books behind you and that's the impression you want to leave, great. If you want to be in nature and you have some plants or something, then that's fine. Whatever you want to be the background. Exactly. Yeah. All the plants in my house are in our kitchen and basically are taking over our entire kitchen, especially now that it's gotten cold. I think there are more plants than plants take up more space in our kitchen than anything else. Anyway, of course, things like cell phone being turned off, having a do not disturb sign on the door. I know they seem like silly little things, and it can. You don't want to come across like you're sort of boasting, hey, I'm doing an interview in here, but ultimately the last thing you want is for someone to interrupt your interview. When we do these in-person training sessions with faculty members, I often show a video of a faculty member in the UK who's being interviewed by the BBC. It's probably the biggest interview he's ever done in his entire life. And in the middle of the interview, the door behind him opens and one of his children just sort of walks into the room. And then another child in one of those little, I don't know, extra saucer things, whatever you call them, comes rolling into the room. And then his wife crawls into the room and pulls the children back out, hoping that she's not on camera. And of course, it went viral. The video went viral. It's very cute and it's hilarious. But, ultimately, it takes away from that faculty member and that, him getting the word out about his expertise. That's not what he got famous for. He got famous because his children interrupted the interview. Feel free to ask for the questions in advance. There's nothing wrong with doing that. In some cases, the media will give you those questions in advance or will email you the questions. This is often the case with, say, print interviews. If it's a radio interview, in a lot of cases, they won't, especially if it's just sort of a talk show. Part of the reason for that is that they're probably going to talk to 10 people over the course of a 2 or 3 hour radio broadcast. There's no way that they're pulling those questions together in advance. And again, it goes back to that idea of it just being a conversation. It's much more natural when they're just able to sort of ask questions and, you don't necessarily have time to look at the question, write down the answer, and then read the answer. It's better if it's just you answering verbally rather than reading it. Now, the interview is starting. So introducing yourself to the reporter, of course, the pronunciation point. This is always sort of an awkward thing. I like to think that my name is not particularly difficult to pronounce. It's not very long. Dankin seems pretty easy. I get Dankin all the time. If I just tell somebody my name on the phone, let's say, I must not pronunciate my D's very well because I get bacon all the time. I quite regularly, Dan Bacon, people think my name is. So, even if you think that you have a fairly standard name, it's good to provide people with, the phonetic spelling, I guess, of your name. That's what we oftentimes will do if we're the ones who are setting the interview up. We'll try to provide that information to, say, a radio host or something like that. But if you have a tough name, you don't take it personally. Don't be insulted by it if someone says, hey, I don't know how to pronounce your name. They're just trying to, make it so that it's not awkward and you have to correct them in the middle of an interview. Ask if it's live or taped. The benefit of a taped interview, of course, is that you can start the question again, or start the answer again, rather, if you don't like how you've answered it or something like that. Live sometimes, obviously, you have to be careful because it's a live interview. But in a lot of cases, you're able to just sort of, go through it and just have a more natural conversation when it's live. Sorry, excuse me. This last point is also something that we try to really instill in people, especially faculty members who have been around for a long time and they like to talk. When you're doing an interview, a good interview is one where it is a conversation, and a reporter will ask you a question, answer that question, and try to just leave it at that, and let them ask you the next question. And the best interviews are ones where it's back and forth. Think of it like ping pong. They ask you a question, you answer it, you send it back to them, then they ask you another question. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of dead air. And I think that that's oftentimes what gets people into trouble, is that you answer a question and you may take a pause and they may not answer a question, they may not ask the next question immediately. Or especially if you're doing a print interview, oftentimes the reporter is writing down your answer, or they're typing the answer, let's say. And so you may feel the need to fill that quiet space, and you kind of go into another point. You don't need to do that. Just let them ask another question, go back and forth. And those are the most natural interviews. Now, this doesn't happen too often, but sometimes things veer in an area that you might not be comfortable answering. If that comes up, there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I'm not comfortable with that," or "That's not really my area of expertise." To the second point, the idea of redirecting. Politicians, watch any political debate, you'll realize how good they are at this. They are able to redirect things back to exactly what they want to talk about with ease. It takes a little bit of practice, but ultimately, you have your sort of key points that you want to talk about. There's nothing wrong with trying to direct the conversation back to those. And if you're on a time schedule, there's nothing wrong with sort of saying, I have to leave it at that. Obviously, don't do that when it's live. The benefit of live interviews is that they never last long. You can have a live interview that's scheduled for half an hour and it will feel like it's 3 minutes. And if you have an interview that's 5 minutes, it will feel like 30 seconds. Live interviews go extremely fast. And oftentimes you get to the end of it and you're kind of like, wow, that went so fast. What did I actually say? So don't worry about timeframes. If anything, that's why it's important to just answer the question that's asked of you, so that you don't have this awkward thing where a host is saying, "Okay, I have to cut you off there. We have to go to news." It's never ideal when you get cut off in the middle of a thought. Now, after the interview, nothing wrong with reaching out to a reporter or a producer or something to thank them for the interview, letting them know that, hey, if you need anything else, if you have any further requests, or if they need clarification on anything, feel free to reach out. We often do that, as well as my role as a media relations person, or other communicators will also reach out to reporters and just say, hey, we're here if you need anything. Please don't ask to see the story before it runs. This goes back to that idea of the internal story, the one that you're going to work with a communication specialist on. In that context, you're part of the process, and you'll get to see it. You'll get to check your quotes and things like that, and we'll make sure that it's a very polished version that we're putting out there. However, when it's the media who is writing a story, don't ask to see the story before it runs. If they're a good journalist, if it's a reputable media outlet, they're not going to let you see it in advance. Ultimately, the media needs to be trustworthy. And I know we've just been through an era where that has come up, and that there's a lot of questions about that and things like that. But ultimately, if the media is sharing a story with the subjects before it runs, it raises a lot of questions around bias and things like that, and just insider things. So we try to not ask that question. However, when the story runs, if there's a problem, then we can very quickly deal with it. And this is the benefit of everything going online before it ever makes it into print. If there's a problem with the story, we have the opportunity to get it fixed rather quickly. What I would ask, and I know that my communications colleagues at every other university that you all represent would ask the same thing. If there's a problem with the story, please don't call up a reporter and yell at them. Let us know that there's a problem, and let us be the ones who sort of take care of getting things fixed. Ultimately, our job as communication specialists, and especially media relations people like myself, is we want to be there, almost like your publicist. You know, if you think about it like that, we'll get the interview request, we'll work with you to schedule it, and you'll do the interview, and then we'll provide you with the link to the interview or the article after. If there's a problem, then we can work with the producer or reporter on that. But ultimately, you should think of us as, you know, basically someone who's part of your team, and we're your communicator for you. So it shouldn't be doing media should not be something that feels like a lot of work, or you know, something that you don't want to do because it takes up so much time. Ideally, we should be the ones who are doing that sort of work, that time-consuming stuff of setting these interviews up, and then you show up for the interview, you do the interview, and you get the exposure for your research. So very quickly, to summarize some key points, using the media and using storytelling, whether it's internal storytelling or external, whether it's YouTube, whether it's just posting something to social media, or whether it's a full media, media release or a press conference. These are very, very good tools that are at your disposal to help get the word out about your research. Second point, of course, be able to answer those three questions. What is my research about? Who's the audience for this research? And how's it going to change the world? If you can answer those three questions, you're in really good shape. This is not a one-time thing. You know, you can tell your research story at multiple points along that research cycle. And then again, to reiterate, you know, we're here to help. Communicators at universities are, we don't have jobs if we don't have research to talk about. And so, you know, we're there to help. Reach out to myself. If you're at Brock, feel free to reach out to myself. At Brock, we have communicators in each of the faculties. At other universities, communications are set up in fairly similar ways. There will always be a communicator who's willing to help you tell your story. And so please reach out. Anyway, I've talked a lot. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Tammy, maybe we can stop the recording now and we can just kind of have a open conversation. So yeah, if anybody wants to jump in here with some questions, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we got lots of time.